A good morning or good afternoon to you all, depending on where you are in the world. So, firstly, this is the module two section of the course. Just bear with me 1 minute. I just have to drag my mouse across. I'm in a very precarious position to bring it up. So we're doing module two, the International GCSE Geography, getting ready to teach. First of all, it's a welcome in terms of introductions, and that will be followed by the session overview, an assessment overview, assessment options, objectives and question types, followed by the mark scheme and the support and resources that we have available to you. Okay. Seems I'm just having a little bit of an issue with my screen. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to sort of mute myself just for 1 second. My most huge apologies for that. There was a big problem with my screen and my computer went down. Don't you just love computers? Okay, so so we're going to be looking at the agenda. We've looked through that and we got on to moving on to what the delegates are going to learn. We're going to understand the mark schemes, the question types, the assessment objectives, practice some of these mark schemes using exemplar students' work, and learn about the support provided by Pearson. So remember, if you've got any questions, put them in the chat box, and hopefully we can get things rolling and you'll forget all those shenanigans at the beginning. So in that chat box, can you type in how long you've been teaching the qualification? Whether you're new to the delivery, whether it's 1 to 2 years, more than 2 years, so we can get a grip of the different people in the room today and how confident you are and feeling understanding the assessment objectives as well. Thank you. Andreas, it is module 2. Sorry, it was just that I hadn't self-corrected it. Okay, so we've got a good mix of people on the course here today. Some are new to it, some aren't a geographer, some longer, some quite long as well. 12 years, Amy, there as well. 3 years, first teaching. And yeah, so we've got a fair mix of people in the room or in the chat room today. So this will make for an interesting topic. And, we've got some experts here as well. Okay, so welcome to Pearson. So very quickly, to let you understand, Pearson, with the world's leading learning company, okay, as the UK's largest awarding organisation, we're best placed to provide qualifications aligned to the British education system. We have an international heritage that stretches back some 150 years. And today we partner with schools, universities and employers, and therefore our globally recognised qualifications are given to over 3.5 million students a year. In terms of the assessment objectives, now many of you would have been at the first one here. The module 1 provides a much more detailed look at the different parts of the spec. However, it's useful just to look at these and make sure you're aware that paper 1 is 70 marks, 70 minutes, 40% of the specification. Paper 2, 105 minutes, 105 marks and 60%. And both of these, paper 1 and paper 2, include fieldwork worth 20 marks altogether. However, paper 2 also includes global issues in section C, worth 35 marks. All these you can view on the specification on pages 6 and 7. So what are the assessments objectives? Well, we've got AO1 to AO4. And in a large share of these areas in the international GCSE, AO1, that demonstration of knowledge and locations, places, processes, and the environment at different scales is worth between 15 and 16%. Whilst AO2, the idea of the sort of understanding of concepts and how they're used in relation to places, environments, and processes, and the interrelationships between these processes is worth between 25 and 26%. So in other words, as you'll see here as you read through, all types of formative assessment is done, and they roughly match the home-based AOs for the 2016 GCSE. It may be useful to pose questions here in terms of understanding. And if you could pose the question, if you have a question, or I'm going to give you any sort of structure of the AOs that you're not quite sure about, that we introduced in module 1, or are you quite happy with the layout of these and the fact that AO3 will present you with the majority of these on this paper? They applies knowledge and understanding to interpret, analyze, and evaluate geographical information and issues. Okay, so the assessment overview here. Paper 1 is worth 7.1%, paper 2, 8.5, in which we're concentrating on 12.9 for AO2, 16.2 for AO3, and 12.4 for AO4. So you can see there that AO3 is still the larger majority of the objectives, and it's certainly one you can plan into your teaching to make sure students have a really good understanding of. So if we look at one of the first questions here, they can be simple recall, the AO1 questions. State one thought of the hydrological cycle, or identify the meaning of the term suburbanization. So it's just asking you for one word. It's about assessing knowledge of information. It's included in the spec. Knowledge means information that can really be recalled purely from memory without needing to understand the context. There may be multiple choice questions. These require a higher level of demand as they are not always simple recall, and it's a matter of crossing out the ones or how you play it to make sure they get the right answer in this respect. In terms of AO2, these can sort of move beyond recall. They require candidates to demonstrate geographical knowledge of concepts and how they're used in relation to places, as well as an interpretation between places, environments, and processes. Specifically, it means that candidates should understand information from the specification context. As you can see from the example here, it shows how candidates need to explain how different groups manage different urban environments. And they should really consider that where it says name developing or emerging country, they should have their resource for that. They should explain who group 1 is and who group 2 is, and explain, in this case, how they manage the challenges within rural environments. So it's a slightly ramped up level of question. AO2 can also draw on case studies. The specification includes a number of in-depth case studies. These are linked to particular topics, for example, resource management in developing and developed or emerging countries, as shown in this example. There are also located examples, which are indicated in the specification with a globe symbol, which you can see in the spec document that is available here on the resources, but also on the website. Centres are free to use any location they wish, as long as they fit the criteria of the specification. And this is laid out for you on page 45. It's also useful to clarify that the specification refers to developing, emerging, and developed countries. A developing country is classed as a country with a low human development, whilst the developing or developed country is classed as one with very high human development. For the sake of the specification, human development is measured here by the Human Development Index. For further information on which countries are categorized as low, medium, high, it's visit the website hdrudmp.org. This is detailed in Appendix 2 again on page 45 of the specification. So in this case, For a name, developing or emerging country, explain 2 ways energy resources have been managed in a sustainable way. And you can see here that it links directly to the specification in terms of energy can be managed in a sustainable way through education, efficiency and conservation. And that you understand that the 4.3 there is countries increasingly experience an energy gap and therefore seek energy security by developing a balanced energy mix and a sustainable energy use. So case studies of emerging resource development, if each one of these at different levels of development need to be known by the students. In terms of AO3 questions, these require students to interpret, analyse and evaluate geographical information and issues. So in this case, you get a question on fieldwork. In terms of methods, explain 2 methods used to analyse some of your fieldwork data. AO3 questions may require some knowledge and understanding, but it is the application of these to the geographical scenarios that's important in gaining those AO3 marks. AO3 also requires students to make a judgment. The example shown here is from the fieldwork section of the paper. AO3 questions focus on interpretation, evaluation, and analysis of geographical information and issues. Often AO3 may be mixed with other skills such as AO4 or AO2. Whilst this example here shows a simple explain question where candidates need to draw on their fieldwork experience to discuss methods of analysis. So they can be combined. But again, allowing students to have that clear understanding of what is AO2, what is AO3, AO4 will allow them to develop in their own way. In terms of those AO3 interpretation skills, this is used to assess their ability to apply their understanding to unfamiliar situations and, in some case, or make their own links between aspects of the subject content. Application must lead to interpretation and analysis, evaluation, and making a judgment. So not only does this apply to fieldwork context, but in relation to a range of resources which candidates will face throughout both exam papers. There are some examples shown here, from the world maps to graphs to data tables to diagrams. These will require students to use a range of different sources on the paper to interpret them. And it's interpret, in this case, means describing and ascribing a meaning to them. So being able to interpret what they mean and being able to describe what's going on within it. Okay. Are there any types of sources candidates find more or less challenging, and why? So if you want to type in the box the sort of resources that you think are challenging, maybe for yourself or maybe for students, be interesting to see what kind of answers we get. Okay, Harry says verbal. Okay. Graphs from Fandika. Graphs, maps, fieldwork, stacked line graphs. Okay, so we're getting a full range at the moment. The amount that's overwhelmed for Amy in terms of the amount of information. Photographs, they can struggle to what to identify. Yeah, I completely sympathize with that one. Compound line graphs, fieldwork again. So there seems to be a good range of ideas of where either the students or the teacher finds difficult to maybe teach, or maybe they find challenging for students to get to grips with. Okay. Now, the typical AO4 questions represent the marks awarded for selecting, adapting, and using certain skills. So this is 24 to 25% of GCSE and 10% of this in a fieldwork context. Questions with AO4 marks require candidates to select, adapt, and use a variety of skills and techniques. Sometimes these are in conjunction with other AOs, as we spoke about earlier. For example, at the top, understanding of issues around managing earthquakes, risk and need, as well as interpreting GIS maps. Some require techniques like calculations, as in the second example you'll see shortly. So you can see here the resources and what kind of question you might get from this. Well, what we see is that sorry, let me just go back. It was here we can see that we've got 3 different resources, and the student has to interpret these, has to consider how they all fit together, but they can use their own understanding from their case studies and apply that to these kind of questions to be able to understand where it takes them. So, for instance, when you have mixed AOs, suggest 2 reasons for the patterns shown here in global CO2 emissions. These are the extended response questions, and we'll always have a mix of AOs to develop a good answer. Other AO2 questions can be mixed like this one with AO3. Candidates need to be able to interpret the graph and to give reasons for the pattern of CO2 emissions. With AO2 and AO3, a suggested explanation should require an exemplification of a point or even a justification. So if you give an explanation, it's important that you require some form of justification for that, or exemplification. In this case, you could say China because of its in massive industrial base or something like that. So there is an understanding that you can apply your knowledge and to the actual resource. When you've got mixed AOs, here is paper 1, where it says study figure 3C and 3D in the resource booklet, analyze the use of hazards, vulnerability and risk mapping in reducing the impacts of earthquakes. So again, you can see why it would need a good mix of those AOs, whilst in paper 2 and section C, it says discuss the view international strategies are only one part of the solution to closing the development gap. And it says using figure 9A, B and C from the resource booklet and your own knowledge and understanding to support this answer. And as you can see there, your marks have come from 3 different areas: your AO2, your AO3, and your AO4. So it's important that students recognise that, and it doesn't become too descriptive, and that they apply, they exemplify, they analyse, and they show their own knowledge in a different situation. The paper 2 example here is a typical question from that 12 markers at the end of section C. They also require that AO3 and AO4 questions for field work as well. So there's a really good appreciation of what's going on there. Lewis, yes, the mark schemes do tell you how many marks are allocated for each AO for these extended response questions. Yes, and it's worth, because students should be aware of where they're getting their marks in some cases. So, for instance, you can see there the answer for 7B. This mark scheme, which we'll look in more detail later, but it's worth noting that you can see how the AOs are divided at the top of the mark scheme for each question. So you can see in this, it's worth 4 marks. You're getting 2 for AO2 and 2 for AO3. So it tells you that there, and therefore, as an examiner myself, senior examiner, that would be what I would be looking at. So hence these become kind of level marks as opposed to point marks, although in this case, not so much. Some words, questions in our exam paper are designed specifically to use command words as a guide for students. They should also stick to these command words when you're making mark schemes or rewarding for appropriate responses. It's important that you use these in your own questions so that you're able to guide students in how they work. On page 47 of the specification, it includes a command word taxonomy, which provides definitions for each of these and the command words that use. So we're going to see things like skills such as calculate and plot, knowledge, describe, give reasons is an explanation, simple, recall, identify or define, and provide a more detailed analysis would be something like evaluate or assess. So it's picking on different skills, developing a student's understanding, or as that should be shown through their work. In the delegate pack here that you should have if you've downloaded from the resources, there are questions from the 2019 exam. I want you to have a go at identifying the assessment objectives, and you can check your answers in the mark scheme that's provided. So have a look at those questions. I'll give you a few minutes to have a look at them and then see how you get on. If you're struggling with that in any way, just put it into the chat box. Is where you are in the world, but it's raining solidly here in Manchester. So once you've got an idea, if you put it out there, let's see how you got on. To go first there. Okay, good. So if you checked it in the mark scheme, it should tell you. Yes, Eden, they are. Lewis, I don't know the exact question, so it's difficult for me to sort of state an answer for that one. Well, let's have a look at the question types themselves then. Okay, so the multiple choice questions. The discussion of AOs has already hopefully introduced you to the types of questions included in the exam. And they're outlined, as I've said, on the specification from page 34. Multiple choice and short answer, data response, and open-ended questions are the sort of things you'd expect to see. Some multiple choice questions like that shown here are simple recall, but can also be a little bit more challenging. So identify one process in river erosion is kind of getting the student to sort of decide which one of the four is river erosion, but also knocking off the ones that aren't. So is it discharge, overland flow, levees, or abrasion? And then identify the type of sampling method used. Now, if that would be applying itself to a sort of fieldwork question, and then it makes the student have to think about the sort of four different techniques and which one would apply. So it's slightly more tricky if they're depending on the resource. In terms of short answer questions like these, they're marked on a point basis. So the 1 mark for the point, 1 mark for the explanation. Okay. And we'll sort of explore a little bit more in the next section about mark schemes and stuff and how they're used in both the subject content and fieldwork questions, as you can see by the example here. So explain why some countries are more vulnerable than others to the impacts of natural hazards. and then you would put your answer. You'd say some countries, or you might, in this case, say countries such as the Philippines, because, and then explain one way that we manage the risk associated with primary data collection. So again, you say the way you managed it and the type of primary data collection and how you code. So for a 4-mark answer, a candidate will get 8 lines to write, not included here for the space on, obviously, on the screen. And for 2-mark questions, would usually get 4 lines. This should be ample. For most students, this should be more than enough. It's not about writing everything. It's not about that sort of a blunderbuss approach to a question. It's about making sure you answer it correctly, but at the same time, thoroughly, and so you can get the most awarded marks. In data response questions, such as this one here, these questions can appear in the subject content section or in the fieldwork. In Appendix 4 of the specification, this explores the different types of geographical skills that candidates should develop, and these can lead to data response questions where candidates may be asked to draw or label something, or complete a graph or charts, and interpret information to find the correct answer. There's 2 examples here. The first on the fieldwork section of paper 1, which asks candidates to complete a bar graph using data from the resource booklet. This is based on an unfamiliar context. It's important that students are able to draw graphs and able to use this skill. And it's one that we often see whilst marking as one that's not always done to the best ability. It's always wise making sure they have maybe a clear ruler rather than an opaque one, so that they know exactly where they're going, and being able to draw it. There isn't a necessity to color it in like the others, although some students like to do that. Makes them feel slightly better, I guess. But at the same time, it's important that in this case, at number 4, which is 15, should be drawn correctly. These questions here can also appear in the subject content or the fieldwork. As you can see, there's a lot of lines on this graph. It could look confusing to students from the off. These skills, again, are looked at. Yeah, Harry, I mean, I would, in terms of colouring in, I wouldn't necessarily colour it in. I would, but that's not, the answer is to get the mark. It's not for the colouring in. The colouring in is irrelevant in one respect. You are there just to put that 15 on, and therefore a good marked line that is clear to the examiner, even if it's got lines across through it, so that you can show it, like in the old days where we used to, rather than colour, we would just do sort of stripes or something like that, just to show where it is, so it's quite clear. As long as it's clear, it can be answered. It's not about the technicality of actually recording that it's coloured in at all. It's irrelevant. It's the fact that it is there and it can be seen. If you know, I know it doesn't say that in the question, of course, Harry, but I would be of the firm. I'll go back to it and show you. But in terms of this, yeah, I mean, how many of them take in a set of coloured pencils? Most of them, all of them come through black and white anyway. And therefore it's just not as relevant as you think. As if I was marking this and the answer was 15 and somebody had drawn a box around 15, just as the others were, but without colouring it in, I would give the marks. It wouldn't be a question of whether it was right or wrong. There is no marks for colouring it in. And that's right, Mary. It's only really relevant when it's a stacked bar graph. That would be more important, so that examiners or students knew exactly which area was which. In this case, it's quite obvious what you're doing. It's not as important at all. So again, coming back to this one, this is exploring a different type of geographical skill that would lead to data response type questions where candidates may be asked to draw or label something interpret information to the correct answer. Here, the example here, the first in the fieldwork section of paper 1, which asks them to complete a bar chart, as you've seen, using data from this and from an unfamiliar context. And in this case here, they're asked to look at this and calculate the range in infant mortality rates. So again, you're looking at the size and the size difference between them. So this is a calculation type question. Students may feel a little bit perturbed by the amount of data on the graph, but it's really, there's going to be a margin of error on this that is there within the mark schemes, as you'll see when you've looked at mark schemes yourselves. So open-ended questions like this analyze the reasons for choice of different soft engineering strategies shown. In this case, you can see it's got different photos, different cliff faces, it's got different photographs and things like this. These depend, so they require a longer response and depend on the command word, require candidates to do different things. These questions in section A of paper 1 and section A and C of paper 2 require candidates to use the resource to form part of their answer. There are different command words for 8 marks, and those are given on the specification on page 47. So it's important when an 8 marker is there, you'll see the sort of AOs that are available for that question and that they answer it. So the reasons might be to do with the type of geology or something like that. And it's important to recognize and assess that in that unfamiliar context that they might have, or analyze it, I should say. More open-ended questions in the section B of the fieldwork of both papers can focus on the resources that are provided, or can indeed focus on a candidate's fieldwork experiences themselves. The examples here require candidates to respond based on an unfamiliar fieldwork context. Candidates should be prepared to write about fieldwork experiences at these lengths in both unfamiliar and familiar ways, so that they're able to do that. The 8 marker in paper 1, I think to my knowledge, yes, everyone has had some form of resource with it in one context or another, Mary. So you can see here the different ideas. The student has done an EQS and their results are given there. And it says evaluate the student's methods. So students need to understand in this case why an EQS might be biased or might not be completely fit for purpose, or it could be to do with the photographs or something like that. So it's important that students are able to understand the pros and cons of each technique that they use. In terms of their familiar questions, these students are going to require to interpret, analyze, evaluate, and make judgments about their own fieldwork. They will also be required to communicate their findings. These could be extended responses, 8-mark questions about their own fieldwork. Again, question 4C on page 24 of the sample assessment material will show you the sort of areas that we're looking at. Or they could be short answers, low tariff questions about their own fieldwork. So question based on them. So you can see here questions 6A and 6D on pages 98 and 99 of the sample assessment materials. Familiar questions could be about their physical or human geography. So explain 2 limitations of the methods that you use to collect qualitative data. So again, that's a familiar context. So you write about the technique and why you used it and what was the limitation to it. You have studied river environments for your geographical inquiry. Evaluate how successful your chosen data analysis methods were in answering your geographical inquiry questions. So this would be a question which wouldn't have a resource to it, because obviously it's your own work and you are now evaluating your analysis methods. In terms of that unfamiliar context, these will relate to the geographical inquiry data collection methods set out in the specification. They will use unfamiliar fieldwork data, and students will need to show that they can apply their fieldwork understanding and skills to interpret and analyze their data. Could be short answer questions about unfamiliar fieldwork data, for example, paper 1, question 4A, paper 4B on pages 21 to 23 of the SAMs, or they could be extended response questions. 8 marks about unfamiliar fieldwork data. Again, question 6E on page 100 of the SAMs. And unfamiliar fieldwork context questions could be about their physical or human geography. So in this case, state the sampling methods in the question above. So the question above would have given those sampling methods. You would name the one you were going to, look at the disadvantage of, and then say what it is. Yeah, Mary, it can be either. They can be based on unfamiliar or familiar. So yeah, you would have to make sure that students were well prepared for both sections of that and both types of questions, and that they understood. I think with fieldwork, it's always important that a student knows why they're doing something. So they seem to speak in exams that they're not actually 100% sure why they do it. So they struggle more with explain, why you did something or something like that. They really struggle with those sort of questions. They're not as confident as they are as suggesting which methods did you use kind of questions. As Amy said, a pattern that she's noticed is that the shorter mark questions are about unfamiliar fieldwork and the 8 marker is about familiar. And it's the opposite on paper 2. I can't say that's going to be expected each time. It could be just an anomaly. It would tell you that in the specification. That's how they would come up. So I don't think there's any set pattern as such. Okay, so in terms of the mark schemes themselves, this is something that I spend a lot of time with, helping out on pre-marking, and also in terms of the AOs in this. So mark schemes, the point mark questions. For point mark questions, the mark scheme remains similar to all the old legacy specifications, and there is explicit information on how the marks are actually given. Now, in a mark scheme, we can't write every answer we expect to see. So you'll see there, accept any other appropriate response. If the examiner, the marker, feels it's a legitimate reason, it's not been mentioned on the mark scheme, then it will be added to it. These go through a standardization process whereby people like myself will read them, and we will read some of the questions. And if we feel that there's things missing from the mark scheme, we will offer them to the principal on maybe adding it in or not. So that the other point is they can't be a mark. They'll end up being hundreds of pages long. So we have to keep them relatively concise. So this one is 1 mark for AO2 and 1 mark for AO3. The mark schemes, as mentioned earlier, show the AO balance for the questions at the top. Then it shows how the marks are awarded, and some examples of answers can be given. The mark scheme often cannot be an exhaustive answer, but will provide some exemplification and some examples of how it can be answered. Where questions only have a limited number of possible responses, it will not have the accept or any other appropriate response at the end. In this case, it does. So flat land would be that application and knowledge, and then the AO3, which is easy to build upon. Okay, so near to housing or housing estates, 1 mark for workers and customers, etc., etc. For longer open-ended questions, which are marked on a level basis, there will be some indicative content provided. And these will be organized into different assessment objectives. And it's possible for the mark scheme to cover all possible responses. It's impossible, but it can give some indication of the type of content that might be included. Here you can see an example which provides information about energy. The AO4 indicative content will highlight what information can be obtained from the resource. So it does tell you that there are areas we can look at and say, well, as you can see in the AO4, these are pretty much self-explanatory when you read them. The AO3, again, without knowing the question, would show you the type of expectation that we would expect students to answer. Those answers will come from, obviously, from what they've got, and also that idea that they are appreciating that their case studies have that application. Flat land is worth 1 mark here, but in another question in the mark scheme, it said flat area for unloading. It very much depends where that mark comes from. It has to have that flat land for unloading, so it's the same thing in many respects. I can understand why you think. I think these sort of things, if they just say flat land, it's the second part of that that helps answer the first part, if you see what I mean. Whereas flat land for unloading is building on that first part before they then go on to a second part. But there must be that second part for the first part. If you put flat land, yes, you're probably going to generate a mark, but it's not going to work in that case. Okay, so Amy says, in an 8-mark question like this, would students be given credit for using another case study not in the provided resource that they have studied to support their points? It's yes and no. It's a difficult one to answer. There isn't a need to do that. However, some students might feel comfortable doing that. On the downside of that, Amy, is that sometimes students will then go into a full remit of tell us everything they know about that case study and drift away. And that's the thing I would be a little bit concerned about. Sue says, does an 8-mark question require intro and conclusion? Not necessarily. If you're answering the question, it very much depends. Evaluation tends to require a judgment or a conclusion at the end. Assess, less so in reality, because you're balancing and discussing the balances between points. So it's a little bit less necessary. An intro, a lot of teachers like to teach via an intro to get the student on the right tracks. It isn't necessarily needed, but sometimes teachers and students feel comfortable in answering questions that way. In terms of the mark schemes here, for the level mark schemes for the specification, they do not change year on year. And you can see here for 8 marks, analyze question, these are the kind of sort of levels, as you can see. And as you can see, it's useful to introduce the candidates to the levels that can be used to assess their work and try to demonstrate the differences between them, and because it's about how they fit into that. Understand what they need to demonstrate that they are providing answers to the highest level. If we look at level 2 and level 3 and we look at the differences, there doesn't appear on the surface to be that much, but level 2 may be unbalanced, the arguments may not be quite right, leading to a judgment that is not always supported by evidence from the picture or from the resource, and therefore it's not a full complete answer. Now, when you look at a level 3, generally really, really solid, good all-round answers. They've got good balance, they use geographical skills, obtain information, and the argument all round is supported. They're generally the top end, and they will require you to use quite a lot of space to write that. In this case, as I said, this one is used for an analyze question, for analysis. It's not going to need a conclusion. You are analyzing something. You're not making a judgment or evaluating. So it might not need that, but it's going to need to apply its understanding to deconstruct information and provide those logical connections between concepts throughout. And that's important to understand. Okay, so in your delegate packs, you have 2 exemplar responses for 3 exam questions and the related resources and mark schemes. If you read through the exam responses, try and attempt to mark them using the mark schemes provided. Okay, I'll give you about 5 minutes to have a look at that. So it's 1:56 now. I'll give you till about 2 p.m. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that one. If somebody else knows, if they could put it into the window, I've got access to them here. Page 16. Thanks, Samuel. Hopefully you've done that now. So let's have a look. I can see Lewis has a little bit of an issue with 1B. Let's have a look at these responses. So we see that question, the first one gets full marks, gets 4 out of 4. And it's a real good, solid answer, whilst 1B, explain the formation, only gets 2. So it says meanders are formed by faster velocity occurring on the outside of the bend and slower velocity on the inside. This causes the river to erode the outside of the bend and deposit material on the inside. Well, my sort of idea of rivers is that the faster is on the inside and the slower areas are on the outside, hence the creation of river beaches and whilst river cliffs are formed on the inside. So the understanding is there, the explanation, but unfortunately they've just got it slightly the wrong way around, and hence it's not worth the full marks. Is that okay, Lewis? Depending on what your class, I suppose, is the inside and the outside, isn't it? Yes. I suppose they are formed, occurring on the outside bend, and the slower velocity on the inside. They're causing the river to erode faster. Yeah, sorry, I mean, it depends on which side you look at it. In terms of deposit and erosion, but the erosion occurs further down. And the erosion is deposit on the next one, really. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, they have shown it there actually on the diagram. But the point is specific about meanders are formed by faster velocity occurring on the outside. So only really it shows the explanation of erosion and deposition to some extent, but a fuller explanation would have been more applicable. That's right. I mean, they neither explain how it's eroded or how it's deposited as well. So it is quite a basic answer. I can see why you'd think initially, oh, that's a good answer. But it just says erode. It doesn't actually give some examples of abrasion or hydraulic action or whatever the technique is. Okay. So hopefully that sort of gives you an answer. There's always, and this is the interesting thing about mark schemes and marking, we forever argue about what should and what is and what isn't worth the marks. Had they given the type of erosion, I think that would have been a lot fuller answer if they would know this. In the first example, you can see there is an identification of the stages of the development of the landform. It makes adheres to river velocities in different areas of the river and the impacts of erosion, including processes and deposition. In the second example, there are points about the different velocities on the inside and outside of the bend, and the candidate gains marks for erosion on the outside of the bend and depositation on the inside. It doesn't get the marks for telling us the type of erosion that's going on. Okay. Okay. So these two responses here, the sort of exemplar A and example B, as you can see here, provides some example of a fieldwork level marked question. Example 2A gives you an example of an answer achieving full marks, while 2B reaches the mid-level 2 for 5 marks, because it lacks the detail and evaluation of the first one. The first example takes a systematic approach to moving through the figures and provides evaluative comments within each paragraph. In the second example, there is some attempt to consider the techniques and make suggestions about what more could have been done, but it doesn't provide enough evidence, clear detail or evaluative language to get it into level 3. And you can see, if you read these through, they'll be in your packs. You can see why certain questions get certain marks, and these, I find, these are a really good way of showing an answer and determining with students the best way and the best approaches to get the marks. And that simplistic level of writing that is sometimes seen really does throw you into level 2, whilst the more developed frame is much more common. So it's hard to say to you on questions like that because as markers, we mark as we go along. Do I award 8 marks often? Probably not. It is difficult, I think, to get full marks, but not by no means impossible. So it's difficult to say if they fulfill all the criteria of the mark scheme. Then yeah, sure, they're gonna get the marks. But in some cases, students don't tend to do it in certain ways, and there's always or possibly something that lets them down, and that usually takes them down to 6, 7 or something like that. So it very much depends on the answer, and it's hard to actually answer that question from my point of view as an examiner. In terms of these 2 examples of the responses for 12 marks in section C in paper 2, again, the first example achieved the full 12 marks. It provides a balanced approach to the discussion, whilst the second example only includes a limited point and only achieves a level 1 of 4 marks. So you can see the difference in size for a start. You know that there's possibly not going to be enough content there to really develop an answer. There's a range of exemplar answers on the Pearson website. It's really important that you work through these if you're new to this paper and want to work through more sample answers and be able to understand where examiners get their marks from. We are trained as examiners, and I would certainly suggest if you're struggling with these to become an examiner and really try your best to get involved so that you can help your students out. That's the reason I got involved. I examine on the international, I examine on both the A-level and the GCSE, and A-level human and A-level physical as a team leader. And I do quite a lot of work in that respect for the exam board. So it's very hard to give reasons why certain aspects aren't what they are, but we are trying to create a hive mentality from the principal examiner. They mark it, we discuss it with them, and we come to a conclusion whereby this is how we mark, and then we try and apply that across all the paper. And it's that allows us from Pearson to create really valid mark schemes and really valid results as well in the way that it's achieved. So I think there is that balance and support that's necessary in terms of developing your answers. Certainly on the website, there is lots of information that you can gather from the books to the mark schemes, to the exemplars, to all the different ways of approaching the teaching methods in wherever you are in the world. In terms of the support that we offer, excuse me, we do lots of different things. There is a lot of area here where we can plan and your teaching, your learning, exam preparation assessment, results support assessment, and you can see the full range of things that we do. We do training, face-to-face events and online. We have John, who is the John Walton, who's the subject advisor support, generally pretty quick at getting back to you when he's not overly faced and overly busy. There are schemes of work, there's skills mapping, there's sample assessment material, there's good examiners reports. The examiners reports are really important to a teacher. They show you where, as examiners, we feel that students will benefit from an improvement in teaching, or areas that maybe they found difficult or easy. And that's really can help you guide you in your replanning for the following year. There are exemplar mark responses, there's past papers, exam wizard, mark scheme, results plus, mock exam analysis, then the normal results plus, and the access to scripts, some of which we will go through as well. In terms of the teaching and learning material online, you can see here, this is a picture of the website here, and you can see the different elements that we're going to go into, the specification, sample assessments, exam materials, teaching and learning materials, all these different areas that you're able to develop and use. So there's lots of different things available to you from past papers and onwards. In terms of Results Plus, for instance, it's a free online results analysis tool for teachers. You can find your own students on it, you can pull it up, you can look at it in detail. It provides a detailed breakdown of not only a student, but a whole cohort, a class, or however you want to work it by teacher in Pearson Edexcel exams. You can identify topics and questions where students need support. and they will benefit from further learning and informed teaching strategies and approaches for the following year. Teachers can use this to see which questions and spec points students will perform well or poorly in, and use this around their revision, resits, and future class teaching. So it's not just a results tool. You can benchmark your school's performance against other Pearson Edexcel schools in your country and your area. And there is this mock exam results can also be fed into the system. You find student result analysis for their previous Edexcel school. Result Plus Direct gives you students access to their final grades and performance breakdown wherever they are. And schools can be given a free Results Plus account in just a few easy steps. And it's really worth using. It is a good system. With Results Plus, it allows you to develop your own things. In terms of mock analysis, if you can feed in which questions you've used, and it will mark, once you put all the marks in, it will show you how well you've done and where the problems are, much like it would in a normal exam. So students take an exam paper. Exam papers are scanned, and then examiners mark the paper, as you can see there, and performance reports are then shared with you, and you can see those there. If you've not used Results Plus, it certainly is something that you should use. It's a free online service for all centres of Edexcel centres that provide teachers and students with that in-depth insight into their exam performance. It was developed in 2006 when principal examiners were looking at how it could modernise its exam marking process, and brought over ePen, that marking technology from the US. Exam Wizard is something I use quite a lot, certainly for mock papers. A free tool for teachers which helps you make quick homework assignments, topic tests and mocks. Questions tagged against unit topics and assessment objectives are easy and simple to choose, or even just take a whole past paper and use that. It will set it up for you, and you can just print it out, or alternatively send it out for it to be filled in. There has existing mark schemes for you to improve your accurate marking, and examiner reports to look at the insights we had at the time against how you see your cohort doing it. Most recent exam paper is available, and most of it is all available, including last year's, and use the results to understand where students need more support and informed teaching and strategies for you nearer to the exams. That's a very important part. I think I use this quite a lot. It can be a little bit clunky at times, but it's certainly a really good resource for teachers. Access to scripts, the ATS portal, the online portal, is also something really came out of COVID, but immediately it's been very successful. It allows teachers to immediately access a lot of electronically marked exam papers. It's a self-service online, free and instant from results day onwards. Pearson's service cuts down on the speculative EARs, as schools have the time and information needed to make informed decisions. It's a service that allows all the students' marked exam papers, as long as they give you their permission, access to them free of charge. It's available free for all qualifications and will be assessed through Edexcel Online, as long as they were, assessed through Edexcel Online. The scripts do not have an examiner's annotations on them. We no longer do annotations on scripts for this very reason. Pearson is the only awarding organisation to offer this service free of charge. You can use the Access to Scripts service alongside Results Plus, our free online results analysis tool for teachers that gives you a detailed breakdown of your students' performance in the exams. Using both of these services concurrently will help you identify topics and skills where your students could benefit from further learning, helping them gain a deeper understanding of their subject. Find out more about this service and take a look at the user guides that take place through the process, and a step-by-step is available at quals.pearson.com/2017. Yes. It really, you can go through the results window or post results pages of the website. It is as I recall, available through Edexcel Online rather than Gateway or anything like that, or the Edexcel website. So I think you have to have a online account with the college, which you will have if you're using those exams. You just need access to it. Your exams officer will know more about that. There are, of course, additional paid resources. Curriculum matched student books with active books. You can plan, teach and learn. You can plan all of your learning and teaching through this. You can do exam prep and assessment questions, which will help you support you in getting the best from the course itself. Along with that, for Pearson Edexcel International GCSE 9 to 1, Geography with Progression, we also have our student book. These resources are designed for anyone following this course, teachers and learners who want the best preparation for exams and progression to A-level, either that or international A-level, international baccalaureate, diploma and BTECs. These are specifically developed for international learners with appropriate international content. This globally recognized 9 to 1 grading scale, which allows learners to achieve their full potential and make more informed decisions about their options for geography. The Geography Student Book provides 3 years access to the active book. A digital version of the student book can be accessed anytime online and from anywhere. This helps to support learning beyond the classroom. There is online teaching resource pack provided, further planning and teaching and assessment and support, the embedded transferable skills needed for progression to higher education and employment are signposted within this so students understand and can engage with the skills that they're gaining. Reviewed by a language specialist to ensure the book is written in a clear and accessible style, includes a glossary of specific vocabulary as well. So there's lots there for you that you may well want to use. In terms of the subject advisor, there's John Walton. Geography at pearson.com. There is a phone number, not necessary for him, but he will certainly get back in touch with you and answer your questions as much as possible. So there's lots on offer here. There's lots of things for you to get your teeth into. There is lots of good stuff for students and ability to improve your teaching techniques, improve student performance. And after all, let's face it, that's what we're all here for. So it leaves me with any questions. I can now look through this. We're going to put the question and answer slide up for you. I'm just going to look at some of these. No, Sue, the active book is just, it's not PowerPoints for teaching. It's just an online book of that. Mary needs to decide whether to buy the textbook for the next academic year when I put my resources in order in January. Are they worth it? I couldn't tell you. Of course, from my point of view, yes. You can, I think, get one and then read it through, make a decision, and then decide whether to buy a class set or not. That's the way I've done these things in the past. Okay, so are there any questions that I may be able to help you with, or else I'll put you in touch with John, who might be better placed. Other than that, it leaves me to say thank you very much for coming today, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got something out of it. Thank you.